Let's open up the file elliptical.jpg from the cover CD and let's get going with some of the Marquee tool selections. Marquee tool lives in the top left of the toolbar, and it's a very good way of cutting out primitive shapes like squares and circles, rectangles, that sort of thing. It also has a few extra bits and bobs that you can do with it, so let's start off with a bog standard rectangular marquee, and let's just click and draw this darker patch of brick here on the main image. Let's go to edit and copy, edit and paste. Then using the move tool we can move that patch into a new section here. So the marquee tool here is very straightforward. You've got a freehand option there, or you can hold down shift to constrain it to be a perfect square. Alternatively, you could go to style and you could constrain it using fixed aspect ratio. So you could create something like a 7:5 traditional sort of portrait or landscape sized image. So you can make sure that whatever you cropped or copied would fit into a traditional photograph size shape. Alternatively, you could go to fixed size and type in a size that you wanted to constrain the marquee tool to, and that will stay at that size no matter what you try and do with it. So if I try and draw a bigger one, it just won't let me. So you've got a few options there to modify the marquee tool, but let's go back to normal because that's probably the most common option that you'd have. Next to the rectangular marquee you've got the elliptical marquee, and that's very handy for selecting an image like this. Say we wanted to cut out a hole in the middle here and stick a picture of a friend or a family in there and use this as a kind of attractive picture frame device. Let's click on that layer there. Let's double click to make it an editable layer. Click OK and you get rid of the little padlock icon, so we can now cut holes and things in it. And then if we click drag with the marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, we can make a rough selection and then move on to it and then position it by hand, or use the up and down arrows on the keyboard to fine-tune that position as well. If you have trouble making a circle selection, try drawing from the center of the circle, click in the middle and then hold Alt down as you've started to draw, and it will continue drawing from that central point, which is an easier way of making a selection like this. And then let go and fine-tune it accordingly with the arrow keys here. Now if we hit backspace now, it'll cut a hole in our image and we can then create a new layer and pop a picture of a friend in there. But I'm going to do Command Z because at the moment that's a very sharp line there, so we want to feather that, and normally you type in a feather value beforehand and then draw with a marquee tool. If we typed in a feather there now of say 12 and hit backspace, it wouldn't make any difference to our selection. It's still very sharp because we've already drawn the feather. But if we right click inside here, we get the contextual menu. By contextual that means it just pops up wherever the mouse happens to be. We can choose feather from here, type in a feather radius, click OK. Now when we hit backspace we do get the soft feather, so we don't need to reselect that, we can just modify it after we've made the selection. So let's hit Command Z to undo that. Now what you could do with a selection you've already made is, let's go back to say the rectangular marquee tool and let's just draw a little selection here. I'm not going to worry too much. Let's take a section out of the middle. Now if you've made a selection and then you draw another selection on top of it, you will cut out a hole from the original. Okay, so that's quite a clever way of modifying an existing selection. What you can do if you hold the shift key down is you can add to the existing selection. Okay, so that's well worth knowing. That's something that's not so obvious about the marquee tools. I'm holding shift there to add to that bit, but I'm going to let go of the shift key and just draw in here to cut out this bit and then delete, and we've made it quite an interesting shape there by modifying the selection. If I carry on drawing, because I'm not holding shift down, it's going to select a hole here. It's going to cut out this bit here. You can see there it's sort of cut into the shape. And if I hold shift we're adding to the selection. So you can modify it quite cleverly there. Now also with selections that you've created, you can turn them into paths. Now we're going to talk about paths in another movie in more detail, but it's worth knowing that these original marquee selections can be converted into paths, and you can do that by going inside and right clicking, going to make work path, click OK, and then if you go to the paths palette, you'll notice here there's a path selection. Let's just go to palette options and increase the size of that so you can see it a little bit better. And with that you can then go to the various tools that allow you to edit paths, like the path selection tools, and you can click and move the path around, or you can even add extra anchor points to the path and then move those. And I'm just being over the top here by altering my original selection, but you can actually make quite a dramatic change to your marquee tool by doing this. Then you can go to make selection, click OK, and it'll select this whole new area that you made using the path. So that's a little bit over the top, that example. It's obviously not something I'd actually want to use, but it's good to know that you can make paths from initial simple marquee selections. Okay, but I'm just going to go to revert now because I've made a very strange selection indeed there. But hopefully that will give you some idea as to what's possible with the marquee tool. You can also use the single row marquee or the single column. I tend to use those for drawing lines on a screen. You just click, wherever you click it'll draw a single row. Then you could stroke in some detail into that row by going to the stroke option here, click OK, and it just fills that line with a colour that you choose from the foreground here. You can do that with the vertical option as well. Single column marquee tool, do the same thing. So you can draw simple lines and things like that, but more often than not you'd use the rectangular and elliptical marquee tools. I don't tend to use the rows and columns at all, but at least you know that they're there and they can be used if you need to draw lines like this. Okay, but that's enough about marquees. I shall talk about more complicated selection tools in the other movies, so see you then.